She's certain she was murdered last night, but why is she still alive? Claire Malone woke with a jolt, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Cold sweat plastered her dark hair to her forehead as she clutched at her chest, half expecting to find it drenched in blood. The metallic taste in her mouth was so vivid she had to run her tongue over her teeth to make sure they weren't coated in copper. This wasn't a nightmare. It was memory. Last night, she had been murdered. The thought was absurd, irrational, yet the recollection burned with terrifying clarity. Every detail remained razor-sharp, the sudden grip on her arm as she approached her car, the rough hand clamping over her mouth, the violent drag into the shadowed alley beside Rosie's cafe. She remembered the streetlight catching the blade, a cold silver flash before it plunged into her chest. The searing pain as metal parted flesh, the strange warmth spreading across her torso, the gradual fading of sensation as her consciousness ebbed away like a receding tide. Then nothing. Absolute darkness. But now here she was, sitting upright in her bed, heart hammering against her ribs, very much alive. Claire scrambled out from under the covers, nearly tripping over her slippers in her rush to reach the bathroom mirror. Her reflection stared back, familiar yet somehow wrong. Same brown eyes, same slightly crooked nose from when she'd broken it playing softball in college, same freckles scattered across her cheeks, but her skin held an unfamiliar pallor, as though all the blood had drained from her face and never quite made it back. "This is insane," she whispered, her voice cracking. She pulled down the collar of her nightshirt, examining the smooth, unbroken skin of her chest. No wound. No scar. Not even a bruise to suggest anything had happened. Yet the phantom pain lingered, a dull ache just below her sternum that flared when she breathed too deeply. Claire's journalistic instincts kicked in, pushing past the panic. Facts. She needed facts. Yanking open her bedside drawer, she grabbed her phone, nearly dropping it as her trembling fingers struggled with the passcode. The screen lit up, 7:36 a.m., Wednesday. She scrolled through her call history. There it was, outgoing call to Emma Reeves, her best friend since journalism school, at 10:43 p.m. Tuesday. That matched her memory. She'd been leaving the cafe, walking to her car while finishing up their conversation about Emma's latest photography assignment. "I was getting into my car," Claire muttered, pacing the small confines of her bedroom. "I hung up, put the phone in my bag, and then hands grabbing her, dragging her into darkness. The knife. The pain. The end." Claire forced herself to breathe. The journalist in her refused to accept supernatural explanations. There had to be a rational answer. Perhaps she'd experienced some kind of vivid hallucination. A waking nightmare? Or, a chilling thought struck her, what if someone had drugged her? She threw on a pair of jeans and a sweater, not bothering with makeup or even brushing her hair. She had to see her car, had to check if there was any evidence of what had happened. Outside, the morning air bit at her skin with unusual sharpness. Claire hugged herself as she approached the silver Honda Civic parked in its usual spot in front of her apartment building. Everything looked normal, until she reached for the door handle. It gave without resistance. "I always lock my car," she whispered, certain of this habit ingrained after years of living in the city. Sliding into the driver's seat, Claire immediately sensed something was off. The seat position was slightly different, pulled back just an inch more than she usually kept it. Her fingers trembled as she inserted the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a familiar purr, and suddenly, without warning, the radio sprang to life at full volume. "You must remember," a female voice declared, piercing and urgent, before dissolving into static. Claire cried out, fumbling frantically with the power button until the radio silenced. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. "Get it together, Malone," she muttered, using her last name the way she did when trying to center herself during difficult investigations. She checked the time, 8:15 a.m. Rosie's cafe would be open, and the early morning rush would be in full swing. If she'd been there last night, if something had actually happened, there would be evidence. Security cameras. Witnesses. Facts she could grasp onto instead of these slippery, terrifying memories. 20 minutes later, Claire pushed through the door of Rosie's, the bell chiming cheerfully above her. The familiar scent of coffee and pastries that normally brought comfort now turned her stomach. A few regular customers nodded in recognition, local cops, early shift workers, fellow insomniacs who'd become fixtures in her pre-workday routine. Behind the counter, Dave, the owner, was steaming milk for a latte. His bushy gray eyebrows rose at her disheveled appearance. "Claire. You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, sliding the finished drink across to a waiting businessman. "I need to see your security footage from last night," she replied, foregoing pleasantries. Around 10:45. Dave's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Everything okay? You in journalist mode this early?" "Please, Dave. It's important." Maybe it was the desperation in her voice or the pallor of her skin, but Dave nodded, gesturing for her to follow him to the small office behind the kitchen. The room smelled of coffee grounds and cinnamon, with stacks of invoices covering most surfaces. Dave settled into the chair by a small desk and clicked through a program on an outdated desktop computer. "What time did you say?" "Around 10:45. I was leaving, heading to my car." Dave entered the timestamp and turned the monitor so they could both see. The black and white footage showed the cafe's exterior from an angle that captured both the entrance and the small parking area to the side. There she was, emerging from the cafe at 10:40 p.m., phone pressed to her ear. Claire watched herself walk to her car, gesturing occasionally as she spoke, clearly deep in conversation with Emma. At 10:43, she reached her car and finished the call. Claire leaned closer, her heartbeat accelerating. This was the moment. Any second now, someone would appear, grab her, drag her away. But nothing happened. On the screen, she watched herself get into the car at 10:45. Then, inexplicably, she just sat there. Not moving. Not driving away. Just sitting motionless behind the wheel. "What the hell?" Claire whispered. "You okay?" Dave asked, glancing between her and the screen. "Keep going," she urged, her mouth dry as sand. The timestamp ticked forward. 1 minute. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. On the screen, her car remained parked, Claire a silent silhouette visible through the windshield. No movement. No sign of distress. Just stillness. And then, at 11:27 p.m., 42 minutes after she'd entered the vehicle, something impossible happened. The silhouette in the driver's seat simply disappeared. One frame she was there, the next she was gone. No door opening. No movement. Just absence. "What?" Dave began, rewinding and replaying the footage. "That can't be right. Must be a glitch in the system." Claire couldn't speak. Her mind raced, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. If she hadn't been attacked outside the cafe, what had happened? And where had she gone for the remainder of the night? "Dave," she finally managed, her voice barely audible, "does your camera show my car leaving at any point?" He fast-forwarded through hours of footage. The car remained exactly where it was until 6:47 a.m., when the footage showed Claire approaching from the direction of her apartment, getting into the vehicle, and finally driving away. "I don't understand," she murmured. "That's not possible. I woke up at home this morning." Dave studied her face with growing concern. "Claire, are you sure you're all right? You look awful, and you're not making much sense." A sudden thought struck her. "My phone," she said, pulling it from her pocket. There was another call. She scrolled through her call history again and froze. There it was, another outgoing call to Emma, time-stamped 4:12 a.m. A call she had no memory of making. I need to go, she told Dave abruptly, already heading for the door. Thanks for your help. Claire, wait. But she was already outside, dialing Emma's number with shaking fingers. The call connected after 3 rings. Hey, Emma answered, sounding groggy. You okay? After that weird call last night, I was worried. Claire stopped walking, her free hand bracing against the brick wall of the cafe for support. What weird call? You don't remember? You called me at like 4 in the morning. You sounded off. Said you were cold, really cold. That you needed to say goodbye. A chill that had nothing to do with the morning air crept up Claire's spine. Goodbye? Yeah. I asked what was wrong, but you just kept saying you were sorry and that you had to go. Then the call cut off. I tried calling back but it went straight to voicemail. Claire struggled to form words, her thoughts scattered like broken glass. Emma, I need you to be completely honest with me. Did I sound normal? The pause on the other end of the line felt endless. Not really, Emma finally admitted. Your voice was flat, kind of hollow. I figured you were half asleep or maybe had taken a sleeping pill or something. I was going to stop by your place this morning if I didn't hear from you. Claire sank onto a nearby bench, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her weight. Listen, can you meet me? I need to talk to you in person. Sure, Emma replied, concern evident in her voice. The usual place in 30? Perfect. See you there. Claire ended the call and stared at her phone, that impossible 4:12 a.m. timestamp mocking her. If she had disappeared from her car at 11:27 p.m., where had she been for the next 5 hours? And who, or what, had called Emma at 4:12 a.m.? The memory of being stabbed still felt viscerally real. The pain, the fear, the sensation of life draining away. How could she have imagined something so vivid? She needed more information. Pulling up her phone's location history, she checked where the device had been the previous night. According to the GPS data, her phone had remained at Rosie's Cafe until 11:30 p.m., aligning roughly with her disappearance from the car, then showed no location data until 4:10 a.m., when it briefly registered at Fairview Park, a sprawling green space about 2 miles from her apartment. Fairview Park. At 4 in the morning. Claire checked the timestamps again. The call to Emma had come at 4:12 a.m., just minutes after her phone had reappeared on the grid at the park. Then her location showed her moving rapidly toward her apartment building, arriving at 4:25 a.m. She had no memory of being at the park. No memory of walking home. No memory of anything after that moment in the car when. When what? What exactly did she remember? Claire closed her eyes, forcing herself to revisit the traumatic memory. The attack had felt so real. The knife entering her chest. The pain. The darkness. But now, focusing on the moments just before, she realized something didn't align. In her memory, she'd been grabbed from behind as she approached her car. But the security footage showed her safely entering the vehicle. The attack she remembered couldn't have happened, at least, not where and when she thought it had. Could the attack have happened later? After she disappeared from the car? Claire checked the time, she had 20 minutes before meeting Emma. Making a quick decision, she headed for Fairview Park. If she'd been there at 4 a.m., perhaps there would be some trace, some clue to what had happened. The park was relatively quiet at this hour, just a few morning joggers and dog walkers enjoying the crisp air. Claire headed for the central area where her phone had registered, a small plaza with a fountain and several benches. Nothing seemed out of place. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just the ordinary peace of an urban park. She was about to leave when something caught her eye, a glint of metal beneath one of the benches. Crouching down, Claire discovered a small gold earring. Her earring. The one she'd been wearing yesterday. A fresh wave of dizziness hit her as she picked it up, the metal cool against her fingertips. She touched her earlobe reflexively, empty. She hadn't even noticed the earring was missing. "Excuse me, miss. Are you all right?" Claire startled, nearly dropping the earring. An elderly man with a small white terrier stood a few feet away, his weathered face creased with concern. "Yes, I'm fine," she said automatically. "Just found something I dropped." The man studied her for a moment, his pale blue eyes surprisingly keen. "You were here last night," he said, not a question but a statement. Claire's heart skipped a beat. "You saw me?" He nodded slowly. "I walk Biscuit here every night before bed. Insomnia, you know. We were here around 4. You were sitting on that bench, staring at the fountain. I asked if you needed help. It's not safe for a young woman alone in the park at that hour, but you just looked at me with the strangest expression." Claire swallowed hard. "What kind of expression?" "Empty." The man shrugged, patting the small dog now sniffing around Claire's shoes. "Like nobody was home. You said something odd, too. Said you were already gone, and that you were just tying up loose ends. Then you stood up and walked away. I nearly called the police, but you seemed purposeful, if that makes sense. Not confused or drunk. Already gone. Tying up loose ends." "Thank you," Claire managed, her mind spinning with this new information. "That's helpful." The man nodded, tugging gently on Biscuit's leash. "Hope you're doing better today, miss." As they walked away, Claire clutched the earring so tightly that its post dug painfully into her palm. The timeline was becoming clearer, if no less disturbing. Something had happened after she got into her car. She had somehow vanished, only to reappear hours later at the park, where she'd called Emma to say goodbye. Then she'd gone home and, what? Gone to sleep as if nothing had happened. Woken up with false memories of being murdered. None of it made sense. Her phone buzzed, a text from Emma saying she was waiting at their usual cafe. Different from Rosie's, this was a quiet spot near the newspaper office where they often met to discuss stories over lunch. 10 minutes later, Claire slid into the booth opposite Emma, whose concerned expression deepened at the sight of her friend. "Jesus, Claire, you look like death warmed over." Under normal circumstances, Claire would have laughed off the comment. Today, it sent a cold shiver through her. "Funny you should say that," she replied, her voice hollow. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out everything, the vivid memory of being murdered, the security footage showing her disappearance, the mysterious call to Emma, the park, the old man's account, all of it. Throughout her explanation, Emma's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to growing alarm. "Claire, listen to yourself," Emma finally said, reaching across the table to take her friend's hand. "You're saying you think you, what? Died and came back? That's not possible. You think I don't know that?" Claire hissed, pulling her hand away. "I'm a journalist. I deal in facts. But these are the facts I have, and they don't add up to anything rational." Emma took a slow breath. "Okay, let's approach this methodically. When did you last eat?" "What? I don't know. Yesterday. And have you been sleeping properly? Working on any intense stories lately?" Claire recognized the strategy. Emma was trying to find a mundane explanation. Stress. Exhaustion. Overwork. A breakdown of some kind. "This isn't a mental health crisis, Em," she insisted, even as doubt crept in. Could she be experiencing some kind of psychotic episode? Hallucinations? The security footage shows me vanishing. My phone was at the park. The old man saw me there. These things happened. "I'm not saying they didn't," Emma replied carefully. "But there might be explanations that don't involve supernatural events. Maybe you were drugged. Maybe you had some kind of dissociative episode. Maybe. Maybe I was murdered and somehow came back. Claire finished, her voice dropping to a whisper. Emma's silence was answer enough. I need to go back, Claire decided suddenly. Back where? To the alley. Where I think it happened. Maybe there's something there that will help me make sense of this. Emma hesitated, then reached for her bag. I'm coming with you. The alley beside Rosie's cafe was narrow and unremarkable in the daylight, nothing more than a service passage for deliveries and trash collection. Claire stood at its entrance, a cold sweat breaking out across her forehead despite the cool air. This is where it happened, she whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. He pulled me in here and... Her hand moved unconsciously to her chest, rubbing at the phantom wound. Emma stayed close behind her, skepticism balanced with concern for her friend's obvious distress. Let's just be systematic. Look for anything unusual. They moved deeper into the alley, examining the ground, the walls, any possible evidence of a struggle or worse. About halfway down, Claire froze, her gaze fixed on a dark stain on the asphalt. There, she pointed, her voice trembling. That could be blood. Emma crouched down, examining the stain without touching it. It could be anything, Claire. Oil. Coffee. Paint. But Claire wasn't listening. She'd spotted something else, a glint of metal caught in a crack between the pavement and the building's foundation. Kneeling, she carefully extracted a thin silver chain, a delicate pendant swinging from its end. A pendant identical to the one she'd been wearing yesterday. She reached for her neck, finding it bare. Like the earring, she hadn't even noticed its absence. This is mine, she whispered, holding it up. I was wearing it yesterday. Emma took the necklace, examining the small silver pendant, a stylized pen, a gift from her mentor when Claire had published her first major investigative piece. Maybe it fell off when you were walking. The clasp looks broken. Or when I was being dragged into this alley and murdered, Claire countered, taking the necklace back. As her fingers closed around the pendant, a flash of memory struck with such force that she gasped, not of being attacked, but of standing in this very spot hours later, dropping the necklace deliberately, watching it fall from her fingers with detached curiosity. Claire. Emma's voice seemed to come from very far away. I was here, Claire whispered. After. I came back here after, whatever happened. She looked up at her friend, new understanding dawning with terrifying clarity. What if I wasn't attacked here? What if this is where I came afterward? What if? The rest of her sentence died as her phone began to ring. An unknown number flashed on the screen. With a sense of inescapable destiny, Claire answered, putting the call on speaker. Hello, Claire. The voice was female, familiar yet distant. You're starting to remember, aren't you? Emma's eyes widened, but Claire felt a strange calm settling over her. Who are you? A soft laugh came through the speaker. You know who I am. The question is, who are you? The call ended, leaving them in silence broken only by the distant sounds of traffic and the pounding of Claire's heart. That voice, Emma said slowly. It sounded like. Claire nodded, a chill settling in her bones as pieces of an impossible puzzle began to align. It sounded like me.